Welcome to the Intentional Encourager podcast, where each episode brings you compelling conversations and stories designed to entertain, enlighten, and encourage. And now here's your host, Brian Sexton.
And welcome into the Intentional Encourager podcast. I'm your host, Brian Sexton. Thank you for joining us again today. And there are people that you meet and you see their work on social media. You see what they're doing out there. This guy that I have having on today, I saw a quote of his, and I'm going to get into that quote here in just a little bit. But he is a former heavyweight pro boxer, a competitive chess player, a full-time author. He writes about how to develop Stoic street smarts and realize your potential. You can find him at edlatimore.com, Latimore, but you can find him right here, right now on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Ed, what's good?
Hey, what's going on, man? I'm having a good day. How are you?
I am well, man. I've been looking forward to this conversation for a good while. So let's start here. When you talk about Stoic street smarts, okay, I got to be honest. I grew up in a little town in Southern Ohio. Not a lot of people. It was a historically black town because they grew up where the town I grew up in was settled by former slaves. And so it was a different kind of place and a little different kind of town. But I don't know that I grew up with street smarts. Define what Stoic street smarts is and how we can develop those within us. Because I want to do that, man. I want to be more aware of what's going on around me and how to develop those gifts and abilities.
So you have to first, break down the two words or the two phrases that are combined to come up with my tag, Stoic Street Smart. So first the Stoicism part, and that's effectively, I don't like to use the word non-reactive, but a lot of people see Stoicism that way, a system of non-reactivity to our system or our collection of methods to remain even nil. That's what I like to use instead of non-reactive, to keep your emotions even nilled and in control in the turbulence of the world. Okay. So if you start there and go, all right, we have this system to stay emotionally controlled and even nilled in the turbulence of the world. That's important because the world, one, is going to be turbulent and unexpected, and if you are constantly in a state of reaction, you can never be proactive. You can never get ahead. You'll always be at the mercy of the things around you. If for any other reason, then you're always going to be basing your moves on what the world does and not what you're trying to accomplish. So we have that, the Stoicism part. And now we go with street smarts. And when people think about street smarts, it's not this idea of like being a fancy hustler yeah, I mean, I guess hustler to be as inclusive as possible. It's not this idea of being like a street hustler trying to, when someone's trying to get over you. Certainly that's part of it. That's a thing you'll be able to do. But it's more about being able to understand the human in front of you and know what human motivations are. And people are, I like to use the phrase, rationally irrational or irrationally predictable. Either one is fine. But either way, the idea is that how we think a person should behave is not how they will behave. But that's only because we're looking at it with the wrong frame of mind. We're looking at a person as like a highly logical machine. And the reality is most people aren't that logical. We think we are, but we're not. Instead, what people are like overwhelmingly, you can rely on this, that people are going to default to incentives and how those incentives match up to their base level of comfort. Like a person is going to take an advantage or take an opportunity to make a lot of money. But if you offer them something that's going to relieve their condition of starvation and they're starved right now, they're probably going to be like, I need to eat right now. But
yeah, it's like the fight or flight mechanism
right
within us. And so, yeah, I love that. And I mean to jump in there, Ed, but man, I love what you're talking about, and I wrote this down. I was taking notes as you were talking. Understanding the human in front of you.
Right.
Man, I love that because I think people get caught up, Ed. I think people get caught up at times in just looking at what they want to get out of the interaction, right? This is my goal. When I'm interacting with Ed, this is what I want to get out of it. Instead of stepping back and going, okay, what is Ed all about? What am I? And I talk a lot and write a lot about connection. And I think what you just said there is so important, is that a lot of times we have our own agendas in the way of understanding people that are in front of us.
Mm-hmm.
What's a tip that you have that helps you break down that getting yourself out of the way and really focusing in on understanding the human in front of you?
Well, you have to remember this, and this is hard for people, what I'm about to say, but you have to remember that we all want the same thing. And that sounds really simple, but it's but it's the truth. We all want the same thing, and we're not talking about, like let's pretend like you want to be a pro athlete, I want to be a writer or something like that, right? Those not the real thing we want. We want what we perceive the value or the benefit is. Like they talk about in marketing, they go, you don't focus on features, you focus on benefits, right?
Right.
It's not that you want to be featured as a pro athlete or a writer. You want the benefit of time freedom, of recognition and respect, of making enough money to feed yourself and then some, right? To have good experiences. So we all want the same things. All right. So when you start there, then you go to, okay, so how do we go about doing them? And you will notice that every single motivation, whether it looks good or bad to you or not, is all based around trying to achieve that. Now we can go about it misguided, of course, and that's how we end up with a lot of problems and misunderstandings and conflicts in our life. But the reality is that everybody's trying to make themselves feel better and trying to make life good. Even when a person acts unselfishly, they're doing it because they believe that that is the right thing that makes them feel good. So when you put those two things together, you can then look at everyone's actions, and they look different to you at that point. You don't see someone trying to hurt you so much as you see someone trying to make themselves feel better, and very often you happen to be collateral damage.
No, I love what you said there. And I love the pro athlete comparison. I'm a sports guy. And it always intrigues me that, and you live in the Pittsburgh area. I live in West Virginia, but I'm a Cincinnati Reds and Cincinnati Bengals fan.
Oh,
It
nice.
always intrigues me how people will just, they'll hop on sports talk radio or they'll hop on social media when Ben Roethlisberger or Joe Burrow have a bad game, or man, I can't believe that dude dropped three. I can't believe Juju dropped two passes. Man, they were right in his hand. I can't believe that he didn't perform. And we don't keep in mind the pressure that those guys have and how quickly things happen in the moment. I mean, I was watching a guy the other day do a YouTube video, and he was a former professional baseball player. And he said, you literally at the major league level, you have about 350 milliseconds by the time that pitcher releases the ball out of his hand from 60 feet, 6 inches away to decide whether you're going to take that pitch or swing. Roethlisberger has about a second and a half in the pocket to find a guy, if that,
Yeah.
to try to find an open guy 40, 30, and it could be a simple, 10-yard button hook. Maybe Chase Claypool is running a slant over the middle. And he literally has to decide, I've got to throw the ball right now. I've got to release it right now. We talk about quick release and things like that. And people don't understand the timing that goes into that. Why do you think that we are all the time so critical of other people that do things that because I couldn't do that. I couldn't stand back there and decide, where do I have, not that quickly, right? Because I'm not a pro athlete. I've never functioned at that level. Why do you think, Ed, we're so critical of people that perform at a high level and say, you should be perfect? Why is that?
I think there's a lot of answers. I'll just, focus on the ones that I think
Yeah, because you're a
oh
former professional athlete, so
yeah,
you're a
and then
great guy
even
to.
now, I mean, yeah, so a lot of people, the only access they have to the conversation to be part of it is criticism. They don't know anything else, and it's up to the person an interpersonal level. It's up to you to decide how to deal with that. But a lot of times, they're never going to create or do something great. But we have to feel relevant. We have to feel included in the conversation. So what we do instead is we critique, and critiquing, being critical, it's a slow hanging fruit. It's an easy path to be part of the conversation, right? Because how do you identify with something bigger than yourself? You either critique it or you become part of it. And when you don't have anything in your life to be part of, anything in your life to gain meaning from, you're going to choose one of those paths. And if you understand that, you understand a lot of what you see today in every arena, from culture to politics to sports. People need to attack or they need to align. And most humans, I won't even say most humans, all humans pick one of those two choices, or they pick a third when their life is together, which is it's irrelevant. Like I have no dog in the fight when it comes to hockey. I mean, I just don't know the sport. I never watched
Me
I
neither. Me
watched
neither,
one
man.
game when someone or two, I guess at this point. Both times they were live because somehow I got tickets and I went along and I didn't know what I was watching, but I was able to okay, step back and be detached and take it in because I've got no emotional investment because it's not part of my worldview. But once I make something part of my worldview, I I have to almost by definition take a side, right? And then whatever side I take is going to be emotionally charged if I let it be emotionally charged. Like my big thing is whenever I talk sports with someone, my litmus test to determine whether the conversation is worth continuing having is whether they use stats to make their argument. If they don't use stats to make their argument, I know that we are getting into tribalism. We're not talking about the sport anymore. We're talking about my God versus your God. And I think, and I'm able to do that because I'm gonna go at least at the point where I was really really watching a lot of football. I can do that because I'm gonna leave and go kill myself in the gym for 4 hours tonight.
Right, right.
Because I've got a thing, and if not that, I'm working on my writing because I got other stuff to worry about to get
Well, you
emotionally
and I had
invested.
nothing
Yeah.
invested in the outcome of that game. All we were sitting there doing is watching. And man, I wanted to jump in there because I had to train my brain several years ago because I used to get so emotionally invested that if my team lost, I'd be in a bad mood. And one day I kind of had an epiphany, like I didn't suit up. I didn't participate in that. Why am I bummed out about the outcome? It's just,
Right.
why am I bummed out about it? Because tomorrow morning I might have to get up and go to work. I mean, what's it to me? And it changed the way I watch sports. It's not that you don't get invested, and it's not that you don't. You were talking about a couple of minutes ago, and I love what you said about the litmus test that you have for conversation. And the whole running thing has been Jordan versus LeBron, Jordan versus LeBron,
Right.
Jordan versus. And I told my 20-year-old son this, Ed, and I loved what you said there. I said, man, I can come up with a stat, any stat that I want to come up with to make my argument. If I can find it, I can apply it and make my argument. Because he would ask me, he said, who do you think's better, Jordan or LeBron? So, man, basketball hasn't seen anybody like LeBron at his size, his speed, his skill level. I said, but man, you're asking me. Jordan was my guy growing up. I mean,
Right.
and then I watched The Last Dance, and I'm like, man, I forgot how great Michael was. But again, I love that. I love what you said there about tribalism versus having conversation that's rooted in facts and rooted in the conversation being constructive and not destructive. How do we take conversations, Ed, and start applying the constructive part to conversations rather than the destructive part to conversations?
Well, it all starts with your intention for having a conversation. Okay, so I tell people this all the time on social media. One of the reasons why I don't tend to get into foolish arguments with people, even when they say very silly things, is my intention for being in social media isn't to like boost my ego. It isn't to prove my stance is right. It's not to raise my goal is first and foremost uh spread a message that people can use constructively, earn money while doing it, and learn. In all three of those, arguing is at best slightly distracting, and at worst outright costly, right? So I have an intention, and I'm not saying all of your conversations have to be, oh man, if I can't get this bag from this guy, I'm not interested. No, no, no. You have to look at everything you do through the lens of how is this making my life better or worse? And once you start applying that filter, then you can figure out what makes your life better or worse. Because
Yeah.
because I don't think a lot of people know. I just think they it's a process of elimination and experience. You go, okay, this argument really made me feel like trash. I don't want to have that. So you stop. You slowly but surely start to remove arguments from your life, and you start to focus on connection and learning and having a certain approach to these things. That's how I think people get there. I think people get there by having a real intention on improving their life. When you have a real intention to improve your life, it a lot of you just look at stuff differently. And conversation is one of those. Every conversation becomes a way to learn, a way to make someone feel good, a way to get something out of it, not to boost your position, not to attack another person, not to complain or idly gossip. You really try to do something useful.
Man, I love this. I love this conversation. It's so deep and powerful, and I'm loving it. Let's step aside, take a quick break. When we come back, I want to talk to you about the quote that connected you and I, and the
Okay.
reason that I had you on the Intentional Encourager podcast. My guest, Ed Latimore, joining me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Back in just a moment.
Hey everybody, Brian Sexton here. I want to tell you about our sponsor, SEO National. SEO stands for Search Engine Optimization. Now, what's that, you might say? Well, search engine optimization helps you show up higher on search engines in front of paying customers for words that you as a business owner can monetize. What a great concept. SEO National is owned by my good buddy Damon Burton, who's been a guest here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Not only has Damon and his team worked with businesses of all sizes, from e-commerce startups to NBA teams and Shark Tank featured businesses, but more importantly, Damon and his team are about transparency, trust, and providing lifetime value. So much so that he still has his first customers after opening SEO National 14 years ago. Let me give you some intentional encouragement and call Damon and his team today at 855-736-6285 or go to www.seonational.com and get a free quote.
Ed, I want to go here for just a second. You had a quote that I love that you shared on Twitter, and I saw this and I said, man, I've got to reach out to you and have you on the podcast. Here's the quote: crackheads hustle 4 straight days to get a rock. No sleep and no food. You ever work that hard for something? Don't get outworked by a crackhead. Take me through the premise of how you had that. That is brilliant, by the way. That is absolutely brilliant. I agree with it wholeheartedly. I told you that over social media. I'm telling you that here. That is brilliant because it's 100% correct. Take me through how you found that quote or how that epiphany came to you to share that.
Oh, first, a lot of that is this just my sense of humor and what I grew up around, and me trying to make light of it. Because you can either, what's the old quote? You can either laugh a little or cry a lot, and I chose to laugh a little about my surroundings and try to come up with jokes to deal with it. So one day though, when I was younger, we watched this crackhead try to I mean, we just seen him around a lot, and for whatever reason, my mom remarked, I'd seen this guy up for like 4 days straight, and that always stuck with me. I was like 12 or 13, and one day I just, I'm piecing together things and words, and I'm coming up with analogies to make a point and have some fun, and that's where that comes from. It's just me having a sense of humor, but in that joke, like all good jokes, there is truth, and in that truth it but if you're focused on the crack part, you miss the point, like completely miss the point. And some people
100%.
do, and they get I've had people write me, be like, I know someone that died of an overdose, and I'm like, you're not, like, you're missing the point. I'm sorry that humor has become this now, that everyone's feel like they gotta point out how it offends them and you can't make any jokes. But the real point is for a person to go, this person we typically think of as a dredge, a net negative on society. They're out here working hard. What is my excuse? What can I do? And you want to use words to achieve something, which is, ideally something positive, something constructive, like motivation. And that's what the quote does. you
Ed,
know.
let me park on something you just said there, man. You're 100% right. And I never thought of it until we've just unpacked this. We think of people that have addictions and we say they're just lazy, they're no good, they're this, they're that. You just hit on something profound. They're constantly working their mind. They're constantly trying to figure out, how do I get the next high? How do I get, so to your point, man, that is brilliant, because their mind is probably, and they're probably working harder than you and I are working to get that fixed, because they don't know how they're going to come up with it. They just know they got to get it. And I love what you said there about that work. Was there something else that, when you think back to that time in your youth, and we'll get to your story here in a few minutes, but was there something else that you found from watching this guy, besides the fact of, man, this guy is working hard? He's working hard in a different way.
You know,
I mean, did I ask the question correctly? I hope I
I know
did.
what you're asking. I think what you're asking is, what other lessons did I take from this character, right? And I mean, the lesson is this. One of the things I tell people is you have to get control of your dark side. You don't want to get rid of it. You want to get control of it, because that's what's going to give you an edge. That's the thing that's going to make you a little better, a little more competitive. It's like people who get sober, who get clean, and they take that energy, that obsession, and they apply it to something else, and they turn into monsters. I got a guy who trains people. He said his best clients were former addicts, just the way they work and how focused they are. And that's what it is. I mean, a lot of it, dude. I dealt with alcohol abuse, and then I quit. I've been sober for 8 years, and I'll tell you what, man, my life, all that energy was going there. It's here now, and it's great. It's a great outcome. So that's another thing. Another thing that I took from that is a kind of a reiteration or reaffirmation of the idea that you need to take your dark side and you really have to control it. You have to mold it. You have to use it. Otherwise, it's going to use you and destroy you. We don't want to get rid of the demons. We don't want to purge them. We want to put a leash on them, and we want to put restraints, and we want to use that energy and control it. It's like any source of power. Well, fire can burn your house down, or you can heat it. It's up to you.
No, I love what you said there about those sources of power, because again, I think what happens in life, Ed, is experience either does one or two things to us. It either causes us to have so much fear we never want to go back there, and so we're paralyzed about always thinking, man, I'm one step away from going back to where I was. Or it does the opposite effect of, you know what, man, I am focused every day on staying focused and moving ahead. so that that version of myself never comes back again. And I think you just said it beautifully. It's getting control of that dark side and going, listen, man, you're never coming back here again. I don't care what I got to do to put you out for good, but it's never happening again. I want to go here with you with your boxing career. In boxing, for those that aren't real familiar, it's controlled aggression. I
Oh,
mean,
at the highest level.
that's why they call it the beautiful sport. Is in soccer is that way too, but boxing, every part of your body has to be synchronized together. If your footwork is off, your hand placement is going to be off where you jab or punch, or if you're trying to get a right cross or a right hook, and you're not set in that stance that you want to be at to deliver a powerful blow, you're going to be off. Or if you let your opponent dictate the fight to bring the fight to you instead of you controlling the tempo from the opening bell, it's going to be a bad day. When you talk about controlling the dark side, think back to your boxing career. How did you control the dark side when you were inside the ring?
Well, the first of all, there's rules, which is great. There's rules and penalties for breaking said rules. Okay, so what you have to do is you have to learn to not just work on emotion. You don't want to get rid of emotion, because that's no good at all, because you won't have a thing to kind of drive you and push you through a lot of painful situations. But when you do have it, and this was an issue I actually had in my career, I used to try and not have my emotions involved. Instead, I had to eventually learn to use them to energize, motivate, push me through hard days, push me through hard moments. Because willpower is great, but you need a certain kind of fire against the guy you're fighting, because he's coming with it. And if he's coming with it and you don't have it, and you just have this kind of like an android, like a cyborg like approach to things, sure, I mean, it can work, but from a marketing, from a business standpoint, it's not as interesting. From a fighting standpoint, since humans aren't like that, it's certainly better to just learn to control it. When you're angry, like when you get hit in the nose, the 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 uninitiated response is to flare up and get angry. The fighter goes, okay, this hurts. Let me fight through it. But I think at the top level goes, oh, you got one on me, I'm gonna get one back on you when you're in control and you do it.
And I got to ask you this: do you have to force yourself to be pugilistic when you're in the ring? Because you could be, a lot of times you think about, and I'll use this term, squaring up. Okay.
Yeah.
You think about when you're a kid, you get picked on, you get bullied. In my case, I got bullied, and you think, okay, I'm going to square up because I'm ready to fight. I'm going to teach this guy, listen, he's not going to pick on me anymore. He's not going to mess with me anymore. And I think about guys, if I was doing it for a living like you did, there are guys that you probably genuinely like, maybe guys that were really good friends, and now you're squaring off against them in the ring, and it's competition, and it's like, man, I've got to hit this guy. I really like this dude. But I got to hit him. I got to knock him out for me to get paid, for me to move up in my career. How do you control that emotion of kind of forcing a pugilistic attitude?
So what you want to do is you want to understand how your brain is going to work, and then try and not make your brain work against its nature. So when you identify someone as like you, like human, I'm reading this great book on this right now called On Killing, and one of the things they talk about is that it's a lot harder to kill when you when you see the opponent, when you see your enemy, your target as a human, when you see them like you and they do things that like humanize themselves. Like it's harder to kill a soldier if he's in the middle of taking a piss, for example, because that is like you. Okay, so we know that's just how we're built. So one of the worst things you can do, and I learned this too, is you don't want to talk to the guy, you don't want to see the guy as your friend until, I mean, you can do it after you fight, but beforehand, it becomes a lot more difficult for a lot of people. I mean, unless you like a psycho, and then there's certainly, uh, I think people with a greater tendency for psychopathic traits to fight because of what fighting demands of you, and it's easy for a person who's never fought to be like, yeah, it must be hard to hit your boy. And on the other end, I'm like, well, that's my boy. I'm gonna light him up, right? And that's interesting. It's two different thought
Yeah.
processes, um, but it's real because I think we have to understand as fighters, no matter how much you like somebody. I fight guys with families, and I was well aware of the implication of him losing and getting hurt. But it's like, well, that's cool, but he's not thinking about that for me. And I know that if he is, he's going to lose. That's weakness. And if I think about it, it's going to be weakness for me. So it's an interesting balance. But I think ultimately the pros outweigh the cons. And we train. It's for why you train. We train to not think about that kind of thing. Where we train
Yeah.
to win, and really, the quicker you win, the less damage you have to inflict. The damage doesn't come blowing a guy out. If you can do that, the damage comes when you have 8-10 rounds of punishment because it's a high level fight and he's a tough dude, and then you're just like, okay, while you're still here, there's a great fight if you want to like see like some mercy kind of happening, and it happens occasionally, like the old George Foreman when he was coming back, he didn't try and brutalize opponents, but Manny Pacquiao fights this guy Margarito um Antonio Margarito, and Manny Pacquiao was putting a beat on him, and he's just like, "Come on, ref, just stop the fight." He's got a gash. The guy ended up needing like plastic surgery to repair a gash on his face, and Pacquiao was just like, "I'm not really gonna kill this guy. He's beat down." But that's after he beat him down. If he
Yeah.
pulls the brakes back anytime before then, perhaps he doesn't win the fight the way he
Well,
did.
yeah, it's like a defensive lineman having a shot at a quarterback and pulling up, going, "Well, I don't want to hit this guy because if I'm going to blow." No, man, the defensive player is going to do what the defensive player is supposed to do. He's going to blow up the quarterback because if your
Right.
tackle or your back didn't block, didn't do what they were supposed to do, you have put your quarterback in peril. And a defensive guy is going to do what a defensive guy gets paid to do. He's going to blow that guy up.
You reminded me, when the I think, man, I can't remember the year, but you know exactly what I'm talking about. The year the Patriots won, I think it was 07 or 08, when they went undefeated, and they
Yeah.
didn't just go undefeated, man. They were like blowing guys out, and to the point where they were like, why aren't they pulling Tom Brady? And it's an interesting argument because it's like, on the one hand, okay, you guys are winning. Brady's your big investment. Why are we keeping him in? On the other hand, it's like Brady understands that these guys are going to be in there trying to take him out, and the team is trying to hold its competitive edge throughout the season. So let's just keep all the starters in, and keep playing because we're coming to win and we're coming to rip throats out. Okay,
And my
so
guy Randy Moss, who went to Marshall University, where I went to school, was beating guys deep, and all Tom Brady had to do was just throw it up there, and Randy would go get it.
what a freaking nature! I watched the 30 for 30 on Randy Moss, Rand University, and what people don't, here's Randy, I used to be a whole guy. I used to think, talent was this thing that didn't really exist, and you could, give it enough time, work your way up to it. Randy Moss is one of those guys that changed my opinion because because I don't care how hard you work, you'll never be as fast, you'll never be as tall, and his sense of the game, you'll never have that. They talk about when he was up there in New England. I guess a lot of receivers were back when Brady was up there. They would try to go to New England and resurrect their career. You saw that, but I can't even remember the guy's name. But a few guys have gone.
Yeah.
most of them have failed because the system is relative, I guess, more complicated than we would ever know. And Tom said, Randy's the smartest receiver he's ever worked with. A lot of guys come here and they can't get it. They can't figure
Yeah.
it out.
Yeah.
Uh,
And his coach at Marshall, Bob Pruitt, said this before the draft. He said, when God built a wide receiver, you think about all the traits. You want a wide receiver to have great hands. He said, Randy Moss has world-class hands. You want a guy that's tall. Randy Moss is 6'4", 6'4.5". You want a guy that can run. Randy Moss runs a sub 4.3. He said, you got the perfect wide receiver. And what he did was, yes, his talent was so superior, to your point, Ed. I love the point you made. But he had a guy like Chris Carter, who was a hard
yeah.
worker. And Carter talks to this day about saying, look, man, if you're going to have the longevity I've got and you're going to catch everything like I catch it, here's what you got to do. You got to work hard, always be working on your craft. And that's why you see the longevity of greatness with Randy Moss, because he had a guy like Chris Carter who had a longevity of greatness. I mean, Carter was catching balls into his late 30s. And so I love that, man. Let's step aside, take a quick break. We come back, I want to get into your story. You teased it a minute ago about overcoming addiction. I want to get into that. My guest, Ed Latimore, author. You can go to edlatimore.com and find out more about his resources. More with Ed Latimore here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Back in a moment. Hey, everybody, Brian Sexton. Want to tell you about my new book, People Buy From People, 10 Powerful People Lessons from the Ultimate People Person, my dad. My dad was one of the greatest connectors that I ever knew, and he shared with me 10 connecting principles that I have used throughout my 25-year sales and sales management, customer engagement, and leadership career that I'm passing along to you. If you want to be a stronger, deeper, and more powerful connector, you've got to pick up a copy of People Buy From People. There are concepts in there that you may not realize help make you a power connector. You can go to Amazon and pick it up, Kindle if you're an e-reader and you like to do it that way, or now available on Audible. And there's one other way you can get a copy of People Buy From People. You can get one from me and I'll sign it for you. You go to intentionalmediaandpublishing@gmail.com and send me an email, and I'll share with you the link on how you can get a signed copy. You can buy a signed copy directly from me. Again, People Buy From People. If you want to connect like never before, pick up your copy today of People Buy From People. And now let's get back to more great conversation here on the Intentional Encourager podcast. Ed, let's get into your story. I want you to take me as far back as you want to take me from point A to today.
Oh man,
just take us through your journey.
That's a crazy. There's a lot of stuff because there's transitions and things that go up and down. I mean, I was born and raised here in Pittsburgh, and I was born in a public housing project, and I lived with just my mom. I knew my dad, but he wasn't really around, and that teaches you a lot, forces you to deal with a lot things you think are normal till you get around other people and you're like, oh, that's not normal at all. And I went through that when I got to high school, because I went to a high school across town, and there I was like, oh, this is crazy what I've gone through and learned. And then I'm like, all right, this is the life I want to aim towards and try and develop and build myself up towards. So I get out and I do the whole, from 14 to like 22, or like it's an interesting age up and down, but not really anything I think notable in terms of the whole storyline of Ed Latimore, except that at 22 then I started boxing, and I went in, and a lot of guys at that age, a lot of guys period try this, and I don't understand it, but or rather, like, they explain their reasoning, but if they're serious, I don't understand it. They decide they're going to come in and go pro immediately, and that is a bad idea. What a bad idea, because you can't undo your pro losses. and you need to build up yourself in the amateurs and try to be trying to win a national title or something, but learn the craft as an amateur, where you're expected to lose. You just don't make any money. You actually spend a lot of money actually as an amateur. Not as much as if I was like playing polo or something, but it's a lot of money and investment. So I was an amateur from the age of 22. I turned pro. A few weeks. January 26th was my first professional fight, 2013. So that was a few weeks before my 28th birthday. And so I spent, it's great with these dates because you can just like do the math. So I spent the 22 to 28, 6 years as an amateur, and then as a pro, 5 years after that. And I had a really good career as an amateur. I won a national title. I had a ranking, and I got paid a stipend at some point. It was a pretty good time, and took me to a lot, introduced me to a lot of friends, taught me the value of what I could do during this whole time. And I was drinking quite a lot, and I'm sure that hampered my development. But it also kept me, I think, from making moves in a lot of areas. And that became really clear right before I went pro. Right when I was going pro, I didn't have any employment prospects. I didn't any way to make money at all. I was working at T-Mobile as I was as a customer service rep, whatever, not a bad gig, but certainly not one you're gonna make a lot of money on, and you're gonna have to spend a lot of time. I was training to fight, and I said, dude, this sucks. I need more options. And so in the middle of my professional career, when I had just started, and I had also just met the woman who's in the other room now, she's been with me 8 years, I said, I'm going to enlist in the military. So I enlisted in the National Guard and went off, and I said, now I'm going to get some skills and go to school. That was the main reason to get money to go to school. Come out, and when I get back from my training and everything's about to start, I also decide that I got to stop drinking because that's clearly been a problem. So I stopped that, and that's why I consider it December 23rd, 2013. That's like my second birthday. That's like there's like my life before then and my life after, because ever since then it's been really a constantly upward push. It's been, I've improved in my writing, and my website is huge. I had my professional career. I got my degree, graduated with my degree in physics when I was 33. Got a great relationship. Oh, coming up now on, it be 9 years since I met her this year, or 9 years since we've been together. 8 years since I met her. It's been a good life. and I'm really, and I know how bad it could have turned out, because I see what happens. I know how it's stressful, because for me, freedom's everything, right? Like if I made, if I never make more than $100,000 again, but I don't have to worry about where my food is coming from, I'm gonna be happy, right? My bills and all that'll be good. Unfortunately, I don't think that it's gonna happen like that, because what tends to happen is you fall in love with your craft, you improve, and then the results improve, and my craft is writing, and I really just want to continue to be the best content producer and best writer that I can be, and affect as many people as I can with my words. So that's kind of the that's the most abridged version I think I've given of my life in a long time, man, to cover everything. And I left out, some, key or not key moments. I covered the key ones, but things that people go, oh, that'd be interesting, stop off and talk, but that there it is.
Well, Ed, and the thing about it is that I love is that you said my judgment, things got better, because you talked about the alcohol impairing your judgment and not, not having good judgment, but just saying, okay, I need to do better. Looking back, what do you feel like what else got better in your life when the drinking stopped?
Oh man, well, for starters, I people no longer had a way to steal my time through incentives. So And now I didn't really realize this when I stopped drinking. It was just one of those things that happened. And as time went on, I was like, wow, I'm not spending time with some people. I'm meeting other people who are more interesting and more aligned with my purpose in life. And that happened because I stopped wasting time with people who weren't, people who it was only, let's get together, have a drink. Or they knew if it wasn't for the alcohol, I wouldn't come around. So I got my time back. And with my time back, I got to be more productive. I had a focus now, because when you improve via negative, or when you take things away, what tends to happen is you something else has to take that place. This is why you got to be careful when you try and break a bad habit, because you need to replace it with something good. Otherwise, you're just gonna have this hole that's gonna get filled by the lowest energy demand possible, which tends to be a bad habit. But I get rid of the bad habit, and I was really fortunate in the timing of when I stopped drinking, because I was in the military, I had school, I was pro fighting, I had an internship, I had my girlfriend. I mean, I was busy, and I never had time to fall into bad habits, and instead I got to keep building up a bunch of other ones that I'm really happy with. But I would never have been able to, like I couldn't imagine. I don't know how I did it without drinking. Right, when I look back at all the things I was doing, especially in the year 2015, 2016, those were hell years. They were very difficult. I don't know how I would have did that if I was drinking. But since I wasn't, I had a fighting chance, and I got through it all. I always talk about this or think about this. My girlfriend never has to worry about um, my behavior while I'm intoxicated, doing it, that puts the relationship at risk. It never occurs. Like, we were at a wedding once, and then one of the guests got really drunk and caused some problems, and I was like, you should be grateful. You never have to worry about that. You're never gonna have to be wondering, oh, what's he gonna say or do? He's drinking. No, it'll never happen, right?
No,
So and in that, you get this newfound sense of respect, and respect is cool, because respect you have to earn. And I don't care if people like me or not. Like that's certainly nice and cool, but I'm a fan of people respecting me, and when you respect the person, it goes a long way. You want to live in such a way that even your enemies have nothing bad to say about you other than they dislike you.
yeah, yeah,
You know.
100%, 100%. And I want to get to your biggest piece of intentional encouragement, because you have taken us, man, you've taken us through a lot in your life. And I appreciate, thank you for being so transparent with your, what life was like for you. Because a lot of people would listen to this conversation and they would go, man, you're a pro fighter, you're a pro athlete, but you knew you had something that was holding you back with your alcoholism. You talk about your second birthday, man. I loved it. I was just hanging on every word. Like, this is so good what you're talking about. Maybe somebody is struggling with maybe being addicted to working too much. You can be addicted to working too much.
Oh yeah.
You can be addicted to a lot of things, food or something like that. Leave folks with your biggest piece of intentional encouragement, the thing that motivates you and keeps you going.
Uh, you know, it's one single thing, the single biggest thing at Keystone. I I enjoy being able to respect myself, man. That's really important. Now I have a you gotta have a standard. You gotta have something that makes you go, okay, this is worthy of what I would do. This isn't. When you have that, and then you don't want to let yourself down, you want to keep reaching that, then you're in a good position. You know, then you're able to go, all right, this is what I want to do. This is this is what I don't want to do. This is how I want to live, and everything falls into place with your value system. And so that, I think, is the most important thing to have, is a value system. If you go from that value system, everything is gonna fall into place, and you'll be happy. At the very least, you won't live with any type of surface level or deeply rooted shame.
Man, I love that. The most important thing in life to have is a value system, a good value system. Ed Latimore, man, this has been great conversation today. Tell folks how they can get connected with you, get connected with your resources, reach out to you. I know you're on Twitter. You have a website. Just tell folks how they can get connected with you.
I'm Ed Latimore everywhere. I'm Ed Latimore on Twitter. I'm Ed Latimore on Instagram. I'm Ed Latimore on Facebook, LinkedIn. My website is edlatimore.com. It is all just EDLATIMORE.
Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, and then you can go to his website, edlatimore.com, LATIMORE, edlatimore.com. Ed, man, what a powerful conversation we've had today. And man, I can't thank you enough for doing this and joining me today on the Intentional Encourager podcast.
Oh, no problem, man. I'm really happy that you had me.
My thanks as always to producer Bryce Sexton and technical advisor Matt Means. And of course, the ultimate thanks goes to the Lord Jesus Christ, who provides intentional encouragement every day through his word. If you're not subscribed to the Intentional Encourager podcast, hit the subscribe button wherever you get podcasts so you don't miss an exciting episode where you can get encouraged and stay encouraged. And remember, anyone, anywhere, at any time, any place can be an intentional encourager.